What I was saying is that we are living at a unique moment in the whole history of the human species. Its seriousness and significance, it can't be underestimated. You and your generation are going to have to make a decision now as to whether organized human life will continue on the earth. That's not an exaggeration. The environmental crisis is growing. It's inexorable. It's not going to stop. If current tendencies continue in your lifetime, that of your children, the prospects for organized human existence will radically decline. It's not really controversial. Take a look at any issue of a science journal, every issue that comes along. It's more grim forecasts. We have already made this decision, incidentally, for other species. The current level of species extinction due to anthropogenic global warming, human-created global warming, is already at the level of what's called the fifth extinction, 65 million years ago, when a huge asteroid hit the Earth, ended the age of the dinosaurs, opened a way for small mammals to exist, ultimately us. Now we're the asteroid. We're killing species at the level of the asteroid 65 million years ago, and we're next. It's not far off. Already 300 million people, not a small number, are facing death from lack of water in India after a drought, unprecedented drought that's been going on for years. It soon will be greater. Some things happening elsewhere in the world, Bolivia, other places. Sea levels are predicted to rise within a few decades, not long, by maybe 3 to 6 feet. That'll be a disaster for coastal cities, but much worse than that. Coastal plains like Bangladesh will be inundated. That's hundreds of millions of people fleeing, trying desperately to survive. If anyone thinks there's an immigration crisis now, just wait a couple of decades. And it's plain that the rate of global warming is faster than it's been, far faster, hundreds of times faster than at any recorded time. All of this is happening. What's happening in the richest country in the world? We're having a primary right now. Ask yourself to what extent is the most significant question in world history arising in the primary? Well, on the Democratic side, practically not at all. A few phrases now and then, but practically nothing. On the Republican side, it's raised a lot. It's denied. Every single Republican candidate says it's not happening. One exception, John Kasich. He said, yeah, it's happening, but we shouldn't do anything about it. That's even worse. The one who has the nomination sewed up says it's just a hoax, forget about it, let's not do anything about it. So in other words, we have the richest, most powerful country in world history, which is saying loud and clear, let's race to the precipice as fast as we can and fall over it and make sure that within a short time, organized human life can't persist. That's the richest, most powerful country in the world. Let's go to the other extreme, Bolivia, the poorest country in South America, second poorest in the hemisphere after Haiti, which has been devastated by centuries of imperial racist violence. So go to Bolivia. What's happening there? The opposite. Bolivia is the one country that has established the rights of nature, the rights of survival, as part of their legal system with very extensive efforts. Of course, Bolivia itself is facing prospects of global warming, which are quite severe as the glaciers melt, but they have taken strong action more than any country in the world. They've run international conferences to try to do something about it. That's the poorest country in the world. At the same time that Bolivia was, at the very same time, same month that Bolivia was instituting the strongest measures yet adopted anywhere to deal with the crisis. That same month, the Republican-run Congress in the United States blocked a resolution which simply said global warming is taking place. Not let's do anything about it. A resolution that said it's taking place, blocked by the Republican Congress. That's the richest, most powerful country in the world, the poorest country in South America at the same time. What's the difference? The difference is that Bolivia has an indigenous majority, and the indigenous population has been able to use its majority position to take a substantial amount of political power. And that's representative of what's happening all over the world. If there's ever a future historian, there may not be as matters are proceeding. Those historians will look back at this moment in time with absolute wonder. The richest, most powerful, most advanced, so-called advanced, educated sectors in the world are saying, let's destroy ourselves. The indigenous populations everywhere are leading the struggle to try to do something about it. The First Nations in Canada, tribal groups in India, in Australia, Bolivia, Ecuador, almost everywhere you look. That's the current situation. And it has local elements too. I'll just mention, I'll end by mentioning, I don't want to take a lot of time, but I'll mention one example, which is typical of things happening all over the world. It happens to be one in which I'm personally involved, so I'll discuss it. It's a small, remote village in southern Colombia, Santa Rita, hours away from any highway. You have to get there on a virtually impassable dirt road. I went for personal reasons. As you approach the village, you pass a cemetery with a couple of dozen crosses where people from the village were murdered by the paramilitary, military alliance that the U.S. supports, among the hundreds of thousands of victims. When you get to the village, it's very, when I got there was a meeting going on, a communal meeting of the people of the village, just listening to an analysis of how they could deal with their water problems, a hydrological analysis, participation by the villagers. One person from the village who had gotten an engineering degree was talking about the details. There's a mountain right next to it, which is the source of their water. The mountain is threatened by gold mining enterprises, Canadian-based mining enterprises, which are causing environmental and human devastation all over the world. If the government wants to assign concessions for gold mining, which will destroy the environment, of course destroy the water resources of the village, and they're trying to stop it. After the meeting, the men in the village, I went with them, climbed up the mountain, and on the top had a meeting with shamans and a ceremony, and put a plaque on the mountain identifying it as La Carolina. That's my personal connection. It was dedicated in memory of my late wife, Carol. And the idea was to try to preserve the mountain from the attacks by the West, by the United States, by Canada, by mining operations dedicated to destroying the environment as fast as possible. When we came down from the mountain, there was a communal meal. The women of the village had arranged a meal, and it's an extremely poor village, but I've But there's a level of kindness, sympathy, concern for you, concern for the human species that you just barely can find in rich countries, small people. That's the kind of thing that's happening around the world. That's the situation which you're in. You and people like you are going to have to make the decision as to whether we pursue the course outlined by the power systems in the richest and most powerful countries in history, or whether we're going to listen to the indigenous populations, which both at the broad level, like Bolivia, and at the local level, like Santa Rita, are trying to do something about the future of the species.